All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Intuition Health Show. Great to be back with you guys again. I know it's we did a show a few weeks ago, but before that it had been months. So really happy to be getting the show back on track, and could not be more excited to have the guest that we have today. Somebody that I have been learning a lot from. Kind of new to his work, but definitely so much great information that he's sharing, and I'm excited to introduce him to you guys as well. We've got Dr. Josh Helman joining us today. Dr. Josh is a medical doctor. He's a Harvard-trained physician, is a Harvard-trained physician licensed in 14 states. He holds 2 degrees in biochemistry, a bachelor's degree from Harvard, and a master's degree from the University of Cambridge in the UK. His medical degree is from Harvard Medical School and MIT. He is he's board certified by the American Board of Emergency Medicine and the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. He's a former and current medical director of Hippocrates Health Institute. That's really cool, as well as chief medical officer of 2 different Alzheimer's reversal centers, Brain Power Clinics, and Alzheimer's Treatment Centers of America. And he has also worked at the True North Health Center, focusing on fasting. So that's amazing as well. So Dr. Helman's a plant-based physician dedicated to reversing and preventing Alzheimer's disease in patients. His areas of interest span longevity, regeneration, vitality, toxins, mold, Lyme disease, energy medicine, and breathwork. So all things that I am, very interested and passionate about myself. So I can't wait to dive into some of these things with Dr. Josh. And yeah, he has a passion for applying biochemical knowledge to real-world challenges and embracing a holistic lifestyle approaches to help his patients heal. So let's bring Dr. Josh onto the show. Welcome, Dr. Josh. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Matt. Great introduction. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's an honor to have you on, like I said. And so, like I said, I'm a little bit new to
Sure.
you in the community here, but you're obviously you have so many accolades and so much you know education around not only Alzheimer's but just holistic health in general. Being at True North and Hippocrates and everything else that you're doing. So thank you so much for taking time to be on the show. And today we're going to be talking about how to protect your brain as we age. I know that's been your main focus for at least the last 6 years.
Sure.
But yeah, can you just maybe start us off with what was it that got you, maybe a little bit of your backstory? What got you into, medicine? What made you interested in Alzheimer's research, and kind of what got you into a holistic approach?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, I think I was interested in medicine at an early age because my own father's a physician, a gastroenterologist, and I remember rounding with him when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and there was this gentleman who had gastric ulcers from eating salami and drinking alcohol. And I remember my dad telling him, you have to stop with the salami and the alcohol. So I mean, from an early age, I was like, wow, my dad gets to help people by telling them what they eat. So, but then when I was a teenager, unfortunately, my grandmother got Alzheimer's.
Mm.
So I saw how it affected not just her, but my parents' generation. Because now my mom and dad and their my aunt and uncles are thinking, wait, this is happening to Grandma Eileen today. What's going to happen to us in 20 or 30 years? So as a teenager, I was a nerd. I was studying. I was literally studying biochemistry in the hopes that someday I could put this information to good use. And fast forward 40 years or however long it's been, I'm actually getting to do that because I had my own health scare a dozen years ago. I was 50 pounds overweight, had high blood pressure, and despite my training at Harvard, I thought I was a smart doctor. I could not fix my high blood pressure, and am I being overweight with the traditional medications that I learned about?
Mm,
And it was extremely frustrating. And that's when I started looking for other things, a more holistic, functional approach. And that's where I ended up finding Hippocrates and, and cutting out animal products and that whole approach.
sure. Wow. Yeah. That does seem to be a path for most people to get into the holistic lifestyle, right? As a family member or their own health issues, and they come across this stuff. So, how did you find out about Hippocrates?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I happened to live in Orlando, Florida for about 15 years, and probably 14, 15 years ago, they had a yearly symposium that lasted 10 days in person in Orlando called The Real Truth About Health,
Mm-hmm.
which still exists,
Yep.
but it's now online. And it's cool that now I'm one of the lecturers there. But at the time, I was just an overweight emergency room doctor in Orlando. I was like, wait, there's a free conference in person for 10 days, and I could actually learn about this stuff. So I soaked it up because, there were lectures from lots of different perspectives. I would say that was one area that I learned a lot. Another was I went to this annual cruise called the Holistic Holiday at Sea, which still exists.
Mm,
And, for a week, I heard some of the leading lectures on on basically health and food. And given my 2 degrees in biochemistry, I was a little bit skeptical, but I started looking up the studies, and I knew from some of the older studies that I had studied in medical school, even like the Framingham Heart Study, the group of patients who had the longest lifespan and did the best from heart disease turned out to be the vegans.
mm.
Now, it was a really small number that they looked at, but it actually rang true to some of the things I had learned in the past.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I agree. Like the real truth about health is one of the best conferences that I've found, and I'm so glad that you're part of that now, and that it's all free. That's really amazing. So, so yeah, that's very cool. So I guess for people out there, I think most people probably know what Alzheimer's is, but could you maybe just give like a overview of kind of what it is, maybe what we know about how it develops and progresses and things like that?
Sure. So Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia in adults in the United States in this country. About 70% of adults with dementia, it turns out to be Alzheimer's. But it's a confusing disease process because now that we have AI, machine learning, we've actually gone back and looked, and in each case of Alzheimer's, you have between 30 and 200 root causes.
Mm,
And in each case, they're different and different amounts. So even though we talk about it like it's just one disease, it's diverse. Now, there are some genetic risk factors. It turns out the number one risk factor that we're finding is not enough deep N3 sleep.
mm,
Because when you get deep sleep, that's the time period that your brain is able to clear out the amyloid and consolidate memories. And if you're not getting that N3 deep sleep, you're at higher risk. It turns out when people are in their 20s, they normally get a couple hours of that N3 deep sleep. But by the time you reach age, say 65, that will often go down to only 30 minutes. And by the time you're 80, 15 minutes.
wow.
So I would say deep sleep is one of the biggest risk factors, but there's so many. There's infections, toxins, too much blood sugar, or what we call insulin resistance. We've turned it type 3 diabetes just because it's becoming so common. But there are so many different root causes, and just so people know, dementia means that you have problems with brain processing, specifically memory or emotions or processing information.
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation. Yeah, I don't think, I've talked about this in the past, how, sleep seems to be, it's like one of the most simple things that we can do, but with technology and all the distractions in life, it seems to be one of the hardest things that people implement, to actually follow through with. How would somebody know if they're achieving that level of deep sleep that is so protective for the brain?
Yeah, what I would say is if you really want to know for sure, I would get a formal sleep study, whether you go into the hospital or there are now devices you can wear at home to monitor your sleep better. I would say I'm a fan of things like the Aura Ring, the Apple Watch, things like that. But I will say that at least as we're recording this, today in May of 2025, they're not up to they're they're not good enough. So what I tell people is, if you really want to know for sure, sure, bring your Aura Ring and Apple Watch while you get a formal sleep study, so you
Mm,
can actually correlate because. Sure, your Apple Watch, it'll tell you how much N3 deep sleep you're getting, but I don't know that I would trust that number
sure,
yet.
sure, makes sense. Okay, well, great. You mentioned different chemicals, so I'm a passionate advocate for natural lawns and avoiding pesticides and things. Are pesticides, virtually all pesticides that are conventionally used in agriculture and what people are spraying on their lawns, these are all neurotoxic chemicals. Um, is that do you think that that's playing a role in the increase in rates of Alzheimer's? Do you think it contributes to that at all?
I think it definitely contributes. I'm not saying that's the only root cause, but
Sure.
I think and unfortunately, I think it's going up because many of these pesticides are fatty. And once they get into fat tissue, they can have a half-life of 10, 20, 30
Mm,
years. But for people who are eating animal products, there's normally 10 times the amount of those fatty toxins than there are in plants. And so they're getting a much higher dose of those fatty toxins. Or someone like me, I mean, I'm only been vegan for 10 years, so I had huge amounts of exposure for the first, 40 years of my life.
sure. Okay, great. What about do you have any thoughts on things like air fresheners or like antibacterial chemicals people use in their homes? Would that be another contributing factor, do you think?
Sure, many of those are toxic. So the the inexpensive plugins you might buy at the store,
Hmm.
if you actually look in the chemicals inside, many of those chemicals are endocrine disruptors. And I think that's one of the real eye openers. Just because something is available for sale in our country does not mean it's safe.
Hmm.
Now, you can, I mean, I recommend using essential oils, like real essential oils from plants
Sure.
as a way to freshen the air. But unfortunately, it's a lot less expensive to make these petroleum-based products that many of which are unfortunately endocrine disruptors. And you mentioned another category, and I apologize. If you can remind me but besides the air fresheners.
Oh, like disinfectant
Yeah.
wipes and different, products like that.
Sure. So as an example, I think the disinfectants are also toxic. When I check my dementia patients, measure their toxin levels, often I'll find high levels of one of the disinfectants called triclosan,
Mm,
which is in those hand sanitizers. And I try to get my patients off of that because we know that's an endocrine disruptor, which also means that it's a brain disruptor.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Endocrine disruptor uh, basically translates to brain disruptor. So pretty much anything that affects the endocrine system will have a negative impact on the brain. Is that right?
That's generally true because if you look at what guides the endocrine system, it's the brain. The
Sure.
brain is the master regulator um, for the endocrine system, and the brain is a very fatty tissue, so that it tends to build up fatty toxins, and most of these toxins that we're talking about are fatty. So once they get into the brain, it's really hard for the body to get rid of them.
Sure. Okay, that's great to know. Um, Okay, so what about things like exercise? Is that something that you feel is important for, prevention or even reversal? I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, exercise is very important for prevention and reversal. And here's what's going on. When you exercise, you cause your brain to release something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor. It's a growth factor that actually stimulates the growth of new neurons and new neural connections or synapses. So wherever you are in your brain journey, it's great to have the exercise helping there. And if you're exercising, you're improving your vascular system, and you're not going to get good blood flow to the brain if you've got clogged arteries and things like that.
Okay, perfect. Now that you mentioned that, I've been going through a few of your interviews and your
Okay.
podcast. So just a shout out, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Um, Dr. Josh has a podcast available now, and there's so many great episodes on there that I'm looking forward to going through. So everybody in there or everybody watching, I've got that linked down below. So
Thank you.
yeah, check out Dr. Josh's podcast and all his other stuff, Instagram, YouTube, his website. So everything's linked down below. But in one of those interviews, I can't remember which one it was, but you mentioned caffeine. I think coffee drinkers. So when somebody drinks coffee and they're getting that rush of caffeine, that decreases blood flow to the brain. Is that what I
That's
understood?
that's true by 27%.
Wow.
And but I also caution when I'm talking to the general public,
Mhm.
it turns out that the number one source for antioxidants in the American diet is coffee. So so yes, I'm not a fan of caffeine, but if I tell people just stop drinking coffee and then they're not getting their antioxidants and fruits and vegetables and other things, I think I've done a disservice.
Sure. Okay. Good to know. Wow. All right. So I guess the main goal, I guess, would probably be to get people to eat more fruits and vegetables and drink less coffee. Would that be accurate?
I think that's fair, and to exercise,
Right.
and to get deep sleep, all
Okay.
those
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
things.
It's a holistic approach for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, awesome. Let's see. What else? And of course, everybody, hold your questions for the Q&A at the end, and we'll get some questions answered. Dr. Josh has a gift for everybody, so I'll be giving away an ebook like always, but everybody can get. And I guess, do you want to mention what that's going to be right now?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to my website, which is just drjosh.com/program. So drjosh.com/program. And then there you can download a free list of some of my favorite supplements for the brain. And but I will say I would start with these lifestyle changes first. Is going to be better than any supplement that I can think of.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, perfect. Speaking of supplements, are you a proponent of supplements? And if so, which ones do you think are helpful?
I am. I am so just from my own background, I view myself as an integrative or functional doctor where when I'm trying to reverse a chronic disease like Alzheimer's, I want all the tools available,
Hmm.
both prescription medicines and eating plants and natural supplements too. So, but I would, as a preference, I would much rather treat someone by changing their diet than by giving them a pill to take every day.
Sure.
So that's kind of my bias.
Gotcha. Do you have any like a list of like top supplements that you recommend either for just general health or even specific to Alzheimer's benefits?
Sure. And yes, people can download that list at drjosh.com/program. But specifically, I'll just say, even in general terms, I find that most people, whether you're a raw vegan or you're a carnivore, most people I find are deficient in both vitamin D and vitamin B12.
Okay.
And the only way I know to find out is to test, to do blood levels. Um, and I think that's because you've got, at least in the case of vitamin D, lots of these fatty toxins that are pushing out and keeping people from getting vitamin D because, sure, we get some vitamin D from sunlight, which is an amazing thing. But I find roofers here in Florida, who don't wear a shirt year round, get huge amounts of sun, are also vitamin D deficient.
Hmm.
So if those people can be vitamin D deficient, I think anyone anywhere can be. So for that reason, vitamin D and B12 are the two places I would start. But specifically for the brain, I would say I'm a big fan of algae omega-3.
Hmm.
I don't think that most people get enough omega-3s. And well, I mean, if you look at the ratio, most Americans get a lot more omega-6, which is inflammatory, as opposed to the omega-3. So for that reason, I recommend most people supplement omega-3. And this is a whole long discussion. Sure, you can get omega-3s from things like chia seeds and flax seeds. My concern with my patients with Alzheimer's is they may not have the ability with enzymes to convert those to the DHA, EPA, DPA that the brain needs. And again, I understand it's controversial, but for my patients with dementia, Alzheimer's, I'm normally recommending 3 grams a day of omega-3 specifically from algae oil. I don't like fish because if you're taking fish, you run the risk of getting heavy metals and a lot of these pollutants like the PCBs, the DDTs that are now in our water, wherever the fish is growing, whether it's farm raised or wild caught. Unfortunately, the water in our world is polluted these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm I distill my water. Do you have a specific form of water that you like or kind of recommend? Like, is distilled water, do you think, is that okay, or do you like RO, or does it matter to you?
So I think the first thing is you don't want to be drinking tap water.
Right.
Because throughout the country, tap water, and we both know this, but the viewers or listeners may not.
Mhm.
Specifically, if you look at municipal water supplies, the very last step that they're normally using to get rid of the particulate matter is to add aluminum
Right.
to the water. And we know aluminum causes cancer, it's neurotoxic. So for that reason, I strongly recommend either getting reverse osmosis or a distiller. At True North, for people fasting, we would do double distilled water.
Wow.
But I think the first step is just to understand that despite what we may have been taught, the tap water is not safe for either drinking or bathing. And I'm curious, Matt, I think you like a distiller. What's your favorite one?
Yeah, so I'm actually an affiliate for Pure and Secure. I think that's actually the distillers that True North uses as
Okay.
well. So yeah, I use the Mini Classic CT countertop distiller, and then we actually also have an automatic distiller. So it hooks right up to the water line and automatically pulls in water when it needs to and distills it and has a holding tank. So yeah, that's what I use. But I just recommend, kind of like you said, tap water we just know is toxic. It's got so many harmful pollutants in there. And so whether it's RO or distilled, I think that's, somewhere you just got to start somewhere, right?
Agreed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And just a self plug here. If anybody wants a discount, you can use my code Raw Intuition, linked down below as well if you want to get the distiller that I have. So do you have a distiller that you like, or?
Yeah, I mean, right now I've got a reverse osmosis unit, but
Okay.
it just broke. So I'm in the market. So I'm definitely going to look at what you're suggesting there.
Awesome. Yeah, they're great distillers. Like I said, I think the last I heard, True North uses their distillers
Okay.
as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's a,
I
it's a
remember
good company.
I remember it was a large glass unit.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm sure they've got like an industrial distiller. It's nothing like what I've got. So yeah. But yeah, and we even in our home, I had them put in a whole house. So we have a whole house carbon filter as well, and then we still have another one, a little shower filter, but then we distill the water additionally. So I'm very, trying to be very proactive with preventing exposure to, all the different, pesticides and, other chemicals and pharmaceuticals that get into the water, and the aluminum, like you mentioned, the disinfection byproducts, all those things that,
Sure, the forever chemical.
yeah,
I mean, it's gross what's in there.
yes, it is. So yeah, that I'm glad we covered that, because that's, a lot of people still don't recognize the fact that, tap water is got so many things in there that could be detrimental to the brain, but also, basically every organ system in the body.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I did get some of this information when I studied toxicology as part of emergency medicine, but
Mm.
it was almost like a hidden embarrassing side to it because we were actually taught some of the studies, this goes back 20, 30 years, that the only way to remove PCBs, DDTs from human was if you happened to be a mother and you
Oh,
were either nursing or had a baby. They knew that that in that circumstance you can take those fatty toxins and give them to the baby. But
right.
that was a state of art knowledge that basically once they're in someone, you can't get rid of them. The good news is there are now demonstrated ways to get these fatty toxins that have a half-life of 30 plus years to get them out, specifically with things like total plasma exchange, which I'm doing at one of my clinics,
Mm.
but also EBU, where you're basically blood filtration.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. Do you want to talk about the different Alzheimer's clinics that you work
Sure,
at, and
sure.
kind of give an overview of that?
Sure.
Oh,
Just briefly, I've got one called brainpowerclinics.com. And what we're doing there is offering an FDA approved drug for compassionate use that decreases inflammation, and by decreasing inflammation, we've been able to reverse Alzheimer's.
wow.
It's given intravenously once a month for 6 months, but we're seeing improvement after just the first dose. And the way it works is you may have heard, and your audience may have heard of lectins and
Mhm.
being in plants. It turns out we humans, we make lectins, and specifically a lectin called galectin 3 that is elevated very high levels in chronic diseases like Alzheimer's. So
Hmm.
what this FDA approved drug for compassionate use does is it decreases the level of galectin 3. So that's brainpowerclinics.com. And then the other one also here in Florida is called Alzheimer's Treatment Centers of America. And we're using total plasma exchange. Basically, we take blood out of one arm, get rid of the toxins there, and then in the other arm, put in albumin, human albumin, which is a protein, and we've been able to lower toxin levels that way. And unfortunately, we're seeing toxins, these fatty toxins, heavy metals, forever chemicals. We're seeing that as one of the causes of Alzheimer's.
Mm. Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, is outside of that, if somebody, is, I guess, what are some early symptoms that somebody might experience that would maybe give them, a little more concern or reason to start implementing some of these things, so they don't, have to eventually go through treatments or anything like that?
Sure. So what we're looking for is for a change, right? So Matt, if you never remember people's names, even going back to when you're a kid,
Hmm.
yeah, that may just be your brain, but we're looking for a change. So if all of a sudden you can't remember people's names, that's concerning. If all of a sudden you're repeating yourself, and on your podcast, if you're basically saying the same thing over and over and over again, yeah, that would be concerning. Or if you can't find your keys, and that's happening all the time, and that's a change. Another one is emotional changes. So I'm not saying everyone who gets depressed or anxious, that's from dementia or Alzheimer's, but that's one of the changes that we can see. So again, we're looking for changes in behavior, thinking, or memory.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Um, and I guess going back to it, so I don't have the links to the clinics that you mentioned, but I'll put them in
Sure.
there. Is
Okay.
that something? Well, I assume is it just in person work, inpatient, or can people do virtual? Obviously, they wouldn't be able to do the procedures, but
Yeah. So for virtual, I would just refer you to my website, drjosh.com,
okay,
drjosh.com. I'm licensed, as you mentioned, I'm licensed in 14 states, and I can even do coaching in other states. And then you've got brainpowerclinics.com, and then the other one is just atca.ai, atca.ai for Alzheimer Treatment Centers of America. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's see here. We got some comments going on
All right.
in the section here. They're saying this is so interesting, so glad people are enjoying it.
Nice.
And we got some questions for the Q&A as well. So we'll get to that here shortly. Just a few more things I had noted down to make sure to ask. So, um, could you talk a little bit about nitric oxide and how that can how we can promote more nitric oxide in the body and maybe some supplements or any things that you would recommend for that?
Certainly. So first of all, nitric oxide is a gas. It's just one nitrogen and one oxygen atom stuck together. And it's a gas that happens to open up blood vessels. And as we get older, our levels of nitric oxide at the level of our blood vessel goes down and down and down, starting at as early as age 25.
Hmm.
So we also know that nitric oxide is a supplement that can reverse aging. And where do we get nitric oxide? One of the best ways to get it is leafy greens and beets. And specifically, you want to chew your leafy greens and beets because half of the nitric oxide is produced in the mouth and the other half in the gut. So if you're not chewing well your leafy greens and beets, you're missing out on, I would say, half of the benefit. Now, the interesting thing is when you chew or take in your leafy greens and beets, unfortunately, the boost in nitric oxide only lasts for a couple hours,
Hmm.
which I don't know about you. I'm not eating every 2 hours.
No.
So for that reason, I also take a nitric oxide supplement. The one I take is called Cardio Miracle, which is a powder, which is more than 50 different components. The trick to so that it lasts between 24 and 36 hours is you combine the nitric oxide with antioxidants.
Hmm.
And yeah, and to get that, your listeners can just go to drjosh.com slash um I'm sorry, it's cardiomiracle.com/Dr. Josh.
Okay.
So it's cardiomiracle.com/Dr. Josh, or I've got a link on it at drjosh.com too. So that's I've been taking that supplement for 7 years and recommending it for my patients. You may get flushed right afterwards. That's normal. What I like, nitric oxide will open up blood vessels. I like using it right before I exercise because I have a boost of blood supply to my heart and lungs, muscles, etc.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Speaking of exercise, is there any specific types of exercise that you recommend, or is there any? I'm not sure if there's science showing specific exercise being specifically beneficial for Alzheimer's benefits.
Yeah, so I specifically recommend three different types of exercise. You want to get cardio, you want to get some muscle, building muscle, and you also want to work on balance because the last thing you want to have happen is, be 70 years old, fall and break your hip, and then after a hip fracture in the elderly, you've got a 50% mortality risk in the next year. So I would focus on cardio because you want to work on blood supply. The brain's a very vascular organ. You want to work on muscle because the more muscle you have a lot less insulin resistance. and then third, work on balance. But the key is do the type of exercise you want to do, right? Because if I say you should go swimming and you live in Minnesota and there's no place for you to go swimming in the winter, that didn't really help you.
Sure, makes sense. Okay, well, perfect. And sorry, I'm kind of jumping back and forth here, but back to the nitric oxide.
Okay.
Just a random thing that popped into my head. So now outside of the supplement, what would you think? And maybe they would work together really well, but I'm not sure, since you wouldn't really be chewing it, if it would be a benefit, but like a green powder, like if you sipped like mix some green powder and water and sip that throughout the day, do you think that would help with nitric oxide production further than those 2 hours?
I think it would. So what I would say is instead of sipping it, take it in your mouth, swish it
Mm,
back and forth for 30 seconds before you swallow. Same thing with Cardio Miracle. Don't just drink it, swish it in your mouth before you swallow.
yeah,
It's the swishing which will give more exposure to the bugs in your mouth that normally produce the nitric oxide.
gotcha. Okay, very cool. All right, so I mean, I guess one of the messages that I'm taking from you is that it's not doom and gloom in terms of Alzheimer's and cognitive decline. There's so much that we can do to lower our risks and hopefully prevent anything like Alzheimer's or any other neurodegenerative diseases from occurring. Um, could you, I mean, do you have any like specific stories, like success stories, like inspirational stories that you've seen in your patients that, maybe we can give some hope to anybody out there that's worried about Alzheimer's or currently going through it?
100%. And I think that's the most important message is there's hope. I've been doing this for over 6 years. I've got hundreds of patients. I've reversed their brain problems, including, Sharon, who just last week whispered in my ear and said, you gave me my life back.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, and we did. I mean, she had early dementia when we started with her, and now her thinking, her memory, everything is back. So
wow,
it is really powerful to give someone their their life back. I would just say that it's never too late, but obviously in more advanced cases, it's going to take a lot longer to do it.
sure. Yeah, that's really great to hear because I know like diabetes, they used to say, and maybe they still do in medical school, I'm not exactly sure, that, it's not reversible. Once you have it, you've got it for life. And I know that they used to say that, or maybe they still do about Alzheimer's and other issues like that. But it's so great to hear that, physicians like yourself that have been in this field and seen reversal or just great improvement in patients. I think that'll provide a lot of hope and just relief to some of the people out there that are worried about this topic.
Oh, totally. As an example, last week I interviewed fully Raw Christina. That episode hasn't dropped yet for my podcast, but she shared with me that she got type 2 diabetes as a teenager and was able to reverse it using a raw vegan, fruit approach.
Yeah,
But I mean, if she went back, and she's not going to, but if she went back to eating traditional Western food, her diabetes would probably come back within a few months.
right. Yep. Yeah, that's why, they say that there's no like silver bullet, there's no cure. It's just, you know, changing the lifestyle factors and, if you can't just do it something one time or for a year and then go back to the previous lifestyle or it'll come back like you just said.
100%. So, for example, while we're giving this FDA-approved drug for compassionate use to decrease inflammation, we're also working on the root causes with other lifestyle measures to try to prevent someone from getting the Alzheimer's coming back.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing so much, useful and practical information for
But
people.
but but
Yeah,
but wait, before we go there,
there's more.
why don't why don't we invite people because to the retreat that we're going to be at in August?
That is, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, yes. So yeah, for those that don't know, the vegan wellness retreat is coming up in August this year, 2025, August 10th through the 14th. Dr. Josh is going to be there, so I am super excited to be able to meet him in person. And there's going to be, I can't remember, it's like 40 different presenters that are going to be
Right.
there. Um, I know Dr. Khan is going to be there virtually, I think.
Okay.
Um, there's many others. So there, I'll put the link in the description
Okay.
box. You can check out all of the presenters that are going to be there. And so I'm guessing, are you going to be giving a presentation on Alzheimer's or
Sure.
what's your
Yes.
presentation?
Yeah. So I'm going to be giving two presentations. One is preventing and reversing Alzheimer's. The other one is on longevity,
Okay.
how to make aging optional.
Awesome. Well, I think everybody can can get excited about that.
I hope so.
Yeah, so I'm going to do my best to be there for your presentation. So,
Awesome.
do you have a code that people can use if they want to get a discount on their ticket?
Sure. Yeah. Just it's longevity 100,
All right.
longevity 100.
Very nice. Yeah, Longevity 100. You guys can use that code to get $100 off your ticket if you want to join us. I think they're filling up pretty quick, but I think there is still some spots available for the tent camping spots. But there is more information on the website, so definitely check out the website if you're interested. And we would both be very happy to see you there and to meet some of you out there
Definitely.
that have been watching for
In
so long.
in person. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, okay, well, great. I think we are about ready to get to the Q&A section here.
Okay.
So, before we do that, one more time, what are some of the best places that people can find you and your resources?
Sure. Probably the easiest place is just going to be my website, drjosh.com, drjosh.com. And again, if you want my top supplements for the brain, go to drjosh.com/program. And then the next thing is you can find me on social media. I've got a YouTube channel, Green Brains MD, and you can also find me all the other places on social media at Green Brains MD. Uh,
Terrific. All right. And again, that's all going to be linked down below. So, definitely, I recommend everybody check out all of it. So, okay, let's hop over into the Q&A room here.
Okay.
All right, here we are in front of the blackboard. So let's take some questions from the audience. And again, I'll be giving away one of my ebooks to somebody that asks a question today. And everybody has a chance to go out and get Dr. Josh's his download on his website. So that'll be linked in the description box down below as well. Okay, let's start off with. Looks like Mallory May is in the comment section. What's up, Mallory? Thanks for being here. Okay, Mallory says, I work as a speech language pathologist in a long term care and rehab facility and encounter adults with cognitive impairment ranging from mild to severe. Um, I do have. I do sometimes have patients who are open to lifestyle interventions. What are three impactful things I should tell a person with mild cognitive impairment to help with their condition?
Yeah, so the first is going to be diet, and specifically, I would recommend a low-fat vegan diet with no or very little processed food. I'm a big fan of fruit, so that would be number one. Number two, get them exercising if they're not already exercising. And number three, try to reduce their stress. I know it's easy to talk about that, but there's so many different potential tools for reducing stress, whether it's meditation, prayer, exercise. There are devices. I like Newcomb, but I mean, there's so many different options. for that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. She has one more question.
Okay.
It looks like if I could control what food is in a memory care unit, or if you could control what food is in a memory care unit, what would you serve? He said because the people there have, or she said because people there have pretty much no control over what their food choices are.
Yeah, and that's been my experience when I've toured memory care facilities, even the best ones. Unfortunately, it's normally a bunch of processed foods.
Mm,
So I would, if it was up to me, and I'm looking out for the health of the residents there, I would focus on fresh fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, without a lot of added fats. The I think one of the barriers is the if we were to reverse the memory problems for people in memory care, that ruins the business model.
yeah,
They've then lost some customers. So
makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Um, let's see. JJ, Vegan Knowledge JJ. Thanks for being here, JJ. She says, you may have covered this before I got here, but I have heard fructose is good, protein is bad, but or what? Bad, but for it, I'm guessing for Alzheimer's. But then you mentioned protein as I was coming in. Could you explain how protein affects our brain?
sure. So um, I don't think we did cover this, but in general terms, if you're eating whole foods, that's normally good for your brain. The challenge is, so if you're eating fruit or vegetables, they have fructose complex with lots of other things, so that's fine. I don't recommend eating foods that have high fructose corn syrup in it because that specifically is toxic to the liver. But if you want to eat an apple or a banana or some peas. I mean, those are all healthy. In terms of protein, what's really interesting is most Americans get way too much protein and almost no fiber.
Mm,
We're designed as humans to get at least 100 grams a day of fiber, but the average American only gets about 15 to 30 grams. So instead of focusing on protein, I would suggest that people focus on getting enough fiber. There's no fiber in animal products. And because most Americans are not eating much fruits and vegetables, that's why many of them are deficient in fiber. So it's rare. I mean, these days there are a few people deficient in protein if they, for example, have had a gastric operation preventing absorption. But again, most people are not deficient in protein yet. I think the food industry is pushing the narrative that somehow we're not getting enough protein. But the way you can actually check it, you can do a blood test and measure in your blood your total protein level and your albumin level. If they're normal, you're not protein deficient. You're doing everything fine. But again, how do you measure the amount of fiber in your diet? I mean, I guess you can do a stool test or something like that. But instead of doing a test, why don't you just look and just be honest and say, well, what did I eat in the last 24 hours? If there's not a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, you're probably fiber deficient.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And I will say, every blood test that I've done, I've been towards the top range of protein, and my albumin has always been great. So anybody out there concerned about getting enough, just eating plants, I think you'll be all right
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
most
So
part.
by definition, if you're eating raw plants, plants that are alive, you have to have protein in something for it to be alive. So
There.
if you're eating something that's alive, you by definition are eating protein. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. Tessa says, what fruit is known to be the most beneficial for preventing Alzheimer's? Is there one?
Wow. I mean, I would say maybe some of the dark berries, but
Mm,
it's hard to just pick one, right? And just say, oh, it's blueberries or blackberries. I mean, if you got a darker fruit, it's got anthocyanins or antioxidants that we know are good for the brain. But another one of my favorite foods for the brain turns out to be lion's mane mushroom.
Mm.
So, and I personally take a supplement called Raw Lion's Mane, but yeah, but it's hard to pick just, pick one food. It's really hard to just pick one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, good question, Tessa. Thank you for that. JJ says, I wish I had known these things before with her. Sounds like her father must
Mm,
have had some of this going on. So sorry about
yeah.
that, JJ. But yeah, education is what we need, and so that's why I'm so grateful we have doctors out there like Dr. Josh to help people take these steps before some of these things happen. So yeah, that's what the show is all about. So let's see here. I think Mallory had one more thing to ask. She said, to continue my question about the memory care unit food, the goal would be to reduce agitation, blood sugar issues, etc., and not try to bring them back from advanced dementia.
Right.
So
So I think the answer is still the same.
yeah.
Um, in mentioning agitation, um, a lot of the additives in the processed foods, the MSG, as an
Mhm.
example, adding MSG to it will increase the amount of glutamate neurotransmitter in the brain, and glutamate is excitotoxic, will cause anxiety, etc. So, looking for a food solution to that, I like things like lavender or chamomile. There's a supplement called apigenin, um, but yeah, but they've done studies on human populations comparing a Western processed diet to just eating plants, and the levels of brain neuroinflammation went down dramatically if you can switch someone from highly processed foods to eating fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. So again, my answer would be the same.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, the MSG and the other food additives, even just for I think the effect it has on children should be a warning sign for what it's doing, if we're exposed to that long term, right? So
Sure, the food dyes and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. All right. Um, all right, Mark. It looks like Mark and JJ had the same question here at the same time. What does Dr. Josh eat in a day?
Sure. So I'm the medical director here at Hippocrates. So I'm super lucky
Mhm.
that I get to eat most of my meals at Hippocrates, and on the right, normally available are a dozen different types of sprouts. So normally I'm eating lots of different sprouts, um, sprouted beans, peas, raw corn was just in season here. Um, so I'm basically eating plants. I This morning I had a bunch of tropical fruits. I live here in Florida.
Mhm.
We fortunately have lots of tropical fruits. Yeah, so papaya, mangoes, amazing stuff. And but let me just be upfront, I'm not perfect,
Mm.
right? So if sometimes I'll go out to a restaurant, I normally try to avoid foods with added salt, oil, and sugar. At some places it's not possible, but you know, I normally just say, if can you provide, and we did this a couple of days ago at a restaurant, at a steakhouse actually, that can you give us some cut up vegetables, and for the dressing just a couple lemons, and we'll just squirt the lemon juice, and it was really tasty.
Mm.
So again, number one, I'm not perfect, but I'm spoiled working and living at Hippocrates, where I've got access to all this green juices and wheatgrass juice. And frankly, that's why I'm really excited, Matt, to join you and a lot of others for the upcoming retreat, where
Yeah.
we're going to have all this different fruit, and it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it is. And likewise, I'm so excited. And And this channel is never about promoting perfection, because nobody's going to be perfect. But I think that's why, in my mind, you know, the tips that you're giving for a holistic approach, the more factors that are in our control, that we take control of, that gives us, a little buffer for times when we're not going to be perfect. As long as we're doing a lot of things good, a few things here and there, I'm thinking we're giving ourselves the best chance of making it out of that just fine. So yeah, all right. Well, thank you for sharing your what you eat in a day. Let's see here. Tessa says she's planning to visit Hippocrates soon. So I think she's down in Tessa. You're down in Florida now, right? I think that's where you went, or maybe not. I can't remember now. It's been a while, but yeah, definitely let us know how your visit to Hippocrates goes. Dr. Josh, what's your favorite thing about being at Hippocrates?
Actually, my favorite are just the amazing people that I meet.
Mm,
Who it's a great uh, ground, a place to meet similarly minded people who are open to new ideas. That's where I met fully Raw Christina and Dr. Bean and all these really good friends.
yeah,
So I would say it's the people. It is a 55-acre resort, so it's nice just going to the pool
yeah,
and relaxing or the cold plunge. But if I had to pick one thing, it would be the people.
I love it. Yeah, I can imagine. There's so many great people to surround yourself with, and that's another reason why I think it's important people do their best to join us at the retreat, because that's what it's about, right? It's meeting people that we can connect with, and we align with, and we just lift each other up and help each other just enjoy the best life possible. So
100%.
yeah, definitely. Let's see here. All right. Well, I think that is, unless I'm missing one, let's see. I think that's all the questions, unless anybody has any last second questions they want to pop in. But if not, I just want to thank you again, Dr. Josh, for just everything that you do, how approachable you are. It's just how down to earth and practical, and just so full of great wisdom and knowledge for people to improve their lives. So yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time and for sharing such great information.
And Matt, thanks for having me on and for your service to the public too, and with this program. And looking forward to meeting you in person in Michigan in August. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree. All right. Well, again, everybody. Oh, before we go, let me do a quick. Let's see. We've got 4 people in the drawing here
Okay.
for the free ebook. So let me.
Gonna drum roll. Yeah.
Yep, drum roll. I'm gonna drop down the wheel of names here, and we're gonna spin the wheel. Here we go. And Mark. All right. Mark, you can email me at matt@myrawintuition.com and let me know which of my ebooks you would like, and I will get that over to you. And I appreciate you being here, as well as everybody else, to ask Dr. Josh questions and just to interact in the chat and just learn as much as we can from Dr. Josh while he's sharing with us today. Vegan Knowledge JJ says, "Thank you, Matt and Dr. Josh. Appreciate you." Thank you, JJ. We appreciate you as well.
Thanks, JJ.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Well, again, everybody, thank you for being here. I think we'll have a show next week. I'm still working on confirming, but I'll let you know. Prior to then.
Perfect.
Yes. So thank you again, everybody, for being here, and we will see you next time. Always follow your raw intuition.
Peace and plants.